we're sitting here, Max and I still can't get over the fact that the Pfizer got rid of they unblinded their double-blind study for the vaccine and then gave the placebo group vaccines. So we'll never know what the long-term effects are, as opposed to having a placebo group. So you're supposed to have a group of people who don't get vaccinated and you follow them, and you have a group of people who get vaccinated and you follow them, and then you see what the long-term effects are. They didn't do that. And that's what they're supposed to do. And it should be a huge scandal, but it's not, because the media is the ones who would decide if it's a huge scandal. And the media is funded by Big Pharma, who doesn't want you to think it's a big scandal. And that's why you got to come to YouTube. And that's why we have to shit our pants about getting our channel taken down, because YouTube also answers to Big Pharma. Okay. I'm here with Max Blumenthal, American journalist, and we're talking about the propaganda that's coming out of Ukraine, or about the Ukraine war, and how the media just repeats it. Now, this is pretty amazing. This is the United States government admitting that they're making up shit about Russia over the Ukraine war, and the journalists are cool with it. So this is 3 U.S. officials tell NBC News that the United States claims based on intelligence on Russia were made up simply to preempt the Russians. One U.S. official says it doesn't have to be solid intelligence when we talk about it. So let's watch this.
With the U.S. using intelligence to fight an information war and doing it to Russia for months now, and it's working. NBC News national security correspondent Ken.
So they're using propaganda to fight an intelligence war, and it's working. So we're spewing enough propaganda from the West, the United States and NATO, that we're somehow winning some kind of propaganda war. Now, news people are supposed to not repeat propaganda. They're supposed to debunk propaganda and tell you the truth. Of course, that's not what they do in the United States, because the news media is owned by the same people who want these wars. Okay.
Delaney and live in Washington. Ken, I want to
start. Now, the irony here that they go to this guy. Here's the irony. They go to a guy named Ken Delaney. No, how do I know Ken Delaney? And how do I know who he is? Well, because it was found out, revealed, he got caught running his stories through a CIA liaison. So he would send his stories to the CIA, and they would okay him for him, and then he would submit them. So that's a guy who's working for the CIA. And at the time, he was employed by the Los Angeles Times. So the Los Angeles Times got rid of him over that scandal, being found out that he was working for the people they're supposed to be investigating and debunking. He was actually working with them. Did it hurt his career? No, he got a job at NBC News, and now he's their intelligence reporter for NBC News, the guy who got outed by the Los Angeles Times for working for and with the CIA. That should end your career. Of course, it does it in corporate news, because that's exactly the kind of person they want to manufacture consent. So now they bring this guy on, and here's what he says.
By giving people an example of what this is so they know what we're talking about. Take a look.
They're also suggesting that Ukraine has biological and chemical weapons in Ukraine. That's a clear sign he's considering using both of those.
Can you explain to our viewers what was going on there and what NBC News has learned about that claim this week from 3 different U.S. officials?
Yeah, that was a great example of what we're talking about. That was based on declassified intelligence, but we're also told the intelligence wasn't very clear about what exactly was going on. And they decided to disclose it as a way of deterring Russia from doing that and putting the world on notice.
So what he's saying is that the Biden administration knew that claim was false, and they went ahead and said it anyway to try to get it in front of the propaganda war with Russia. And these 2 morons, or willing dupes, don't have a problem with that. They think that's good because we're winning the war on with propaganda.
This could happen. And that's what's going on here, the big picture. This is an unprecedented use of declassified intelligence. We've never seen this level of information warfare before from the U.S. government. And what they're doing is they're trying to preempt the Russians, get ahead of Russian disinformation, even mess with Vladimir Putin's brain, as one person put it, leave him off balance to try to show that the United States knows what Russia is up to and is going to get ahead of it. It's really rather remarkable. Another example was when they announced that Russia had gone to China to ask for help with getting some weapons. That hasn't come to pass yet, and it was almost a way of putting China on notice. Hey, we know what's going on here. Don't let this happen. So
again, another thing that was made up that you reported, and it didn't happen. And he's saying this is all good because the United States is winning the war against, they're messing with Putin's head by putting out misinformation and propaganda that gets repeated breathlessly by guys like him.
Really interesting and unprecedented use of intelligence here, Allison.
Yeah, and Ken, as you just said, not just intelligence here, unprecedented use. One U.S. official telling you it doesn't even have to be solid intelligence when we talk about it. It's more important to get out ahead of them. Putin specifically.
So it doesn't have to be real. It doesn't have to be true. It's more important we spew this shit, get out there, and then you report it right away. Without fact-checking it, without anything. Well, they fact-check it. They go, well, I have my source inside the CIA. That's their fact-check.
They do something. It's preventative. What else have you learned about that strategy?
Yeah. So Camilla says U.S. propaganda has no basis in truth or reality. It doesn't have to be solid intelligence when we talk about it, U.S. officials said. It's more important to get out ahead of them, Putin specifically, before they do something.
What else have you learned about that strategy?
Well, you know, that may have been a little too candid for some folks at the White House. Their message is basically everything we say is vetted and rock solid. And there is a process. It's run by the National Security Council. But that source was absolutely correct. It's clear what the strategy is here, is to get stuff out that is designed to, again, you know, show the Russians.
So what these are news people polishing a turd. So what the United States has been now admitting is that, yeah, we're saying a lot of untrue shit all the time in order to try to win a propaganda war. And they're sitting there going, isn't this amazing? This is great that they're doing this. It's expected that a government would do that. What is not allowable is for someone who considers themselves news media to then repeat that uncritically. That's the sin here. And they're making it sound like it's a great thing the United States government is doing. And what they're not telling you is that we're not supposed to be cheering it on. We're supposed to be debunking it.
You know, the United States knows what they're doing. Put the world on notice that this is happening. Remember, they talked about that false flag operation that they thought Russia was going to try to do at the start of the invasion. You know, that never came to pass, but that may have been preempted by the U.S.
Yeah, but maybe when we spewed all our lies, it stopped them from doing their false flag. What? That's what he's saying.
Releasing that information, Allison.
So, NBC News says multiple U.S. officials acknowledge that the U.S. has used information as a weapon, even when confidence in the accuracy of the information wasn't high. Sometimes it has used low confidence intelligence for deterrent effect, as with chemical agents. And here it is down here. Sometimes it has used low confidence intelligence to deter effect, as with chemical. So all that talk about Russia's going to do a chemical attack, that was all made up. And they're admitting it was all made up. That's what that is. There's another one. 3 U.S. officials told NBC News this week that there's no evidence that Russia has brought any chemical weapons near Ukraine. No evidence. We're just making it up. And NBC News repeats it. And Ali Veshi says we should have direct military involvement over it. The stuff about China providing military help to Russia was also made up. The U.S. officials said there are no indications China is considering providing weapons to Russia. The Biden administration put that out as a warning to China not to do so. So again, they're making all this up. And it's being repeated by corporate news as fact. And of course, you can repeat a lie from the government and never get kicked off YouTube or Twitter. But you tell the truth that the government is lying and you will get kicked off Twitter and YouTube like Scott Ritter did. And we're going to talk about in our next segment. So they're lying. So Bolivia knows that we're lying.
Quiero recordar lo que pasó en
I'd
este
like to
mismo
recall
consejo
what happened
hace
at the
algunos
Security
años.
Council some years
Ser
ago.
preciso,
To be exact, on Wednesday, February 5th, 2003, when the U.S. Secretary of State came to this room to present us with in his own words, convincing evidence that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And I think it's essential that we remember those images. That we remember that in this very room, we were told that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And that this led to an invasion. And after that invasion, 1 million people were killed. And a series of atrocities have been unleashed in the region. Let me turn it up.
Is matched by the gravity of the threat that Iraq's weapons of mass destruction pose to the world. Less than a teaspoonful of dry anthrax in an envelope shut down the United States Senate in the fall of 2001. If concentrated into this dry form, this amount would be enough to fill tens upon tens of thousands of teaspoons. This is evidence, not conjecture. This is true. This is all well documented.
Podríamos hablar de...
So, by the way, that anthrax was engineered inside a United States military lab. That's where it came from. Didn't come from Iraq. Came from us. So he goes back. Can we talk about the ISIS without that invasion? Would we be talking about that series of very serious and horrendous attacks in different parts of the world? Had it not been for that illegal invasion in Iraq? So there they are again.
Make these weapons. Eyewitness accounts. We have first-hand descriptions of biological weapons factories on wheels and on rails.
Creo que es imprescindible que recordemos.
I think it is imperative that we remember what history teaches us. On that occasion, the United States asserted forcefully that it had all the evidence to prove that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. They were never found. Never were they found. So there you go. So when you hear stuff about war crimes being committed by Russia in the middle of a war, remember this. Remember that the biggest liars in the world are the United States government and their corporate media. Max, would you like to comment on this?
I'm glad you brought up Ken Delanian's background. I mean, that's key. He's doing his job. He's doing his job as a publicist for the CIA, someone whose whole career is shaped around advancing their imperatives. And one of their imperatives is justifying their budget. So what they're doing is they're taking credit for what they see as victories in this war. They're trying to show how they're shaping the course of the war through Ken Delanian. That's the whole point of that segment. Right. So you can kind of see the CIA and MSNBC are indistinguishable. We can call it MSCIA. So that's obvious. But they say some deceptive things in that segment. First, that this is about a war with Russia. I don't think Putin or the FSB gives a crap about what Ken Delanian or the CIA say or about any of these stories that are tumbling out, which are so transparently bogus. This is about the CIA's war with the American people. They are not trying to preempt something horrible Russia does. What they're doing is they're priming the American public to support horrific actions, either by the Ukrainian proxies of NATO or by the United States itself. And that's why they were constantly warning about a chemical attack, because we saw what happened in Syria. Chemical attacks were all blamed on the Syrian government. In the case of Duma, it appears there was no chemical attack. Bodies were just displayed as atrocity exhibition in order to generate public consent for the West to lob missiles at Damascus. It was a classic staged event, a false flag operation, not just according to me, but according to the OPCW inspectors on the ground. And so they were laying the groundwork for something similar to take place. What the CIA was doing was cultivating American support for another false flag. We may not have seen it yet. They're also trying to generate this hysteria in the public about a Chinese-Russian military alliance. They're trying to inflate the military potency and threat of Russia. That's what the point of these stories is. And now they're admitting they were totally false. They're basically taunting us.
Yes.
And no one in the media seems concerned that the intelligence agencies are planting these stories left and right. So Ken Delanian isn't even the worst one here. The New York Times, they took these stories and allowed them to be planted in their pages, and they're not correcting them or removing them. Ken Delanian is just the agency's publicist. The New York Times, those are the stenographers, and it's the stenographers who are the real problem. There is no critical scrutiny of the intelligence agencies here. There's no intelligence reform.
Well, they hire them. They hire the former heads of the CIA, the FBI, and they put them on their staff at MSNBC and CNN, and they go to them for, instead of, you should hire someone to debunk what they're saying. You don't hire them. Go ahead.
Right. Exactly. I mean, Operation Mockingbird. Most people watching this probably know what it was. It was exposed by Carl Bernstein in the early 70s at a time when there was media scrutiny of the CIA and the intelligence agencies because of the catastrophic failures and lies surrounding Vietnam. And it came out through the Church Committee, which was the Senate actually doing its due diligence and scrutinizing the intelligence agencies instead of fusing with them, which is what the Intelligence Committee in the Senate does today. And it showed that journalists were being paid by the CIA, just direct payments. Now Operation Mockingbird, it may not exist. It's just part of the culture of journalism today, where journalists vie to be the biggest publicist of the CIA, and CIA operatives are hired to sit in studio with them and help craft their material. MSNBC, they hired Jeremy Bash. He was the chief of staff to the CIA, former husband of Dana Bash, CNN correspondent. Then you got Michael Hayden, John Brennan, James Clapper, who lied to Congress. They're all contributors. This would have been much more unthinkable back in the era of intelligence reform when Congress actually applied scrutiny. There's just no check on the CIA carrying out what is clearly mendacious domestic propaganda to manufacture public consent for a possible nuclear war.
Come see a live stand-up show or be in Orlando, Tampa, Cleveland, Columbus, Pittsburgh, Las Vegas, Omaha, Des Moines, everywhere. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for our live show tickets. Also, become a premium member and get access to all our extra stuff and help support the show. See you at a live show. Single tickets now available. Single tickets available.